Hey guys, welcome back to another video, this time on reassembling the cylinder head with a new cylinder head gasket on my Range Rover P38 with the 2.5 liter turbo diesel BMW M51 engine. So this also applies to the BMW E34 and some other BMWs with a TDS engine. This is the exact same engine, so you can follow this step by step. Let's get going. Part 1 is also available on my YouTube channel, where we removed the cylinder head to inspect it because I had a cracked head. So there's also a step-by-step video on how to remove the cylinder head from the BMW M51 engine on my YouTube channel. So now I've prepared the replacement cylinder head and it's time to lift it in place onto the engine block. And I've prepared the engine block. I've cleaned up this whole surface and made sure that the locating dowels are in place. Okay. So now we'll place a thin bead of sealant between the timing cover and the cylinder block. And then it's time to put the correct size cylinder head gasket in place. There we go. Now it's time to hook the cylinder head to the engine lift, and you have to be very careful with this timing chain guide, which is made out of plastic. It cannot bend and you don't want to destroy it. And that goes into the timing cover here. So when you're lifting, it's very important that you mind the plastic timing guide. Also, the manual says that you have to put the left hand rear bolt in and lightly oil the threads. This is because you can't get the bolt back in when the head is in place because of the firewall. But I don't really know what they mean with left hand. Is it the left hand side when you're looking at the engine, or is it the left hand side of the car? So we'll just put both of the rear bolts in when we lift the cylinder head into place. Okay, so we'll put some oil on it and then use a little cloth to spread it out, because we don't want too much oil on it. And then we'll put it in the left hand rear or right hand rear, whatever. And do the same with another bolt. There we go, and then we can hook the whole thing up to the engine lift. Okay.
Vi ska inte ta dit lyften.
Så.
Fortsätt.
Ja. Okay. Yeah, touchdown. Nice. So now the cylinder head is in place, and we can just double check that it is in place and that it doesn't move. So it's seated on the dowels properly. We see that this plastic chain guide is in the correct position. So you want to make sure that none of these connectors or glow plug wires are between the cylinder head and the engine block. Also, just make sure that your camshaft timing is still in the correct position. So now it's time to drop all the cylinder head bolts in place. And we'll just lightly oil them like I showed you before. And then we'll put all the bolts in place. and then we tighten all the bolts by hand. Okay, now it's time to start tightening these head bolts to 80 Newton meters, and we're following a certain sequence, and it's the opposite of when we loosened the head bolts. So now we start by tightening the inner bolts first and then go in a cross pattern outwards. Okay, that's all the bolts tightened to 80 Newton meters. And now we have to loosen them all by 180 degrees. And I'm using my little angle gauge for this. And we're going to follow the same sequence. Okay, we'll loosen it by 180 degrees. That's all the way loose again. Now we've loosened all the bolts with 180 degrees, which means that they're basically finger tight. So now we can tighten it again by 50 Newton meters. So we'll tighten all the bolts in the same sequence again with 50 Newton meters. And now it's time to tighten all the bolts by 90 degrees. So we'll use our angle gauge again and tighten all the bolts with 90 degrees. And that's our first round of 90 degrees. And now we'll have to repeat it for another round. There we go. That's the final bolt tightened by 90 degrees. And now the manual says to run the engine for 25 minutes. And this obviously means that we have to assemble the whole engine before we can run it for that long. So that will be the next step. So we'll put the bolts, the 5 bolts and 1 nut that secure the cylinder head to the timing cover. So there's a long bolt on the rear as well as on the side of the thermostat housing. And we'll torque them to 20 Newton. Now we'll put back the timing chain tensioner rail. And then it's time to put the camshaft sprocket on and engage it with the timing chain. And the workshop manual states that if the engine has done more than 20,000 kilometers, you should put a feeler gauge in between the face of the cylinder head and this camshaft positioning tool. And the feeler gauge has to be 4.61 millimeters thick. And it's supposed to be on the inlet side. And then we'll torque the bolt to 20 Newton meters to start with. And then we'll have to tighten it a further 35 degrees using an angle gauge. Ooh, that's tight. There we go. And now we can remove the camshaft holding tool. And then we'll put this chain retention bolt back in. And we'll make sure that it holds the plastic chain guide. And then we can take our tool, put it in there, get it around that retaining bolt. And then we can loosen the tensioner and pull out this tensioner retaining pin. And then we can release the force and the chain will be tensioned again. Yep. And then we can refit this plug, that is the access hole for the chain tensioner retaining pin. And with the timing chain back in place and tensioned, we can also remove the flywheel locking pin. Now that's a tight fit, but we got it out. Okay, so the manual doesn't state it, but I think it's a pretty good idea to turn the engine over just to see that you got the timing right and that nothing is hitting. And it feels all right, so that's very good news. So now we just have to hook up the rest, make sure that this gets into the right place. We'll hook up the dampener to the belt. We'll put a thermostat and thermostat housing back on, and then we'll reconnect all the coolant hoses, connect all the glow plugs and temp sensors, as well as put the manifold back on. We'll reconnect the turbocharger to the manifold and so on and so on. I've assembled the engine as far as necessary to start it. So what's left is the intake manifold as well as the intake pipe to the filter. I've done an oil change and I filled it with coolant as best as I could before starting it. So now we'll hook up the battery and see what it does. Nej. Okay, so it started finally after bleeding out the fuel system, but it doesn't sound completely right, and I've got some fuel leaks. So let's see, we've got some fuel leaking out of the leak off pipes, and maybe even at the injector ports as well, at cylinder 1 and 2. So I'll have to check that, and then we'll check again. So now I have run the engine for 25 minutes and gotten it up to temp. The coolant has circulated through the whole system. Now we'll let the engine cool down, and then I'll take the rocker cover off again, and then we'll tighten all the cylinder head bolts another 90 degrees. And then we'll put it back together, and then it's basically ready to run. So now it's time to remove the rocker cover again and tighten the cylinder head bolts another 90 degrees. And when we tighten the bolts another 90 degrees, we're using the angle gauge as well as following the tightening sequence again. There we go, that's all 14 bolts tightened to the proper spec and the proper degrees. So now we'll put the valve cover back on, and then it's time to use the vehicle. So now the engine is all assembled again, and we'll try and start it and see what happens. A year and 15,000 kilometers later, the P38 has been running great the past year since I've done this job, and I'm sorry it actually took so long to edit this video and to get it out on YouTube. But yeah, things happen and I had to prioritize this editing. But anyways, the P38 is doing great. At least you can have the confidence that if you follow this video and did the job correctly, that it will hold up and last. And I've done loads of towing with this, and it's been great. So yeah, good luck with your projects, and please comment down below if you have any questions. As mentioned earlier, part 1, where we tear apart the cylinder head and take off the gasket and everything, is also on my YouTube channel. So yeah, and please suggest down below what I should post next, what things you want me to see me working on. And well, thanks for watching.